my chops and go, man, because that front especially with all those sacks, that's that old style, that dog, truly the era when they created the term dog pound. That's that old physical Browns defense, hit them in the mouth up front and then have the defensive backfield to go back there and make the plays. I think we're seeing, and look at yesterday's game. It's a shame for the Browns to lose a game where defensively they played as well as they did yesterday. I think they held Buffalo to 2 third-down conversions the whole game. They really were very good defensively. Sammy Watkins, Joe Hayden did a good job on him, and I like looking ahead to see defensively perhaps where this Browns defense may end up. But we saw another week here yesterday with a good journeyman quarterback. I'm not the biggest Kyle Orton fan, but he's a journeyman quarterback that can go out there and get the job done if you need him to. Browns defensive secondary stepped up once again here yesterday. We've really seen the Browns defense improving through the middle and into this late part of the season, even with the problems on offense.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, you're right. Buffalo's not very explosive offensively, and Kyle Orton is what he is. He's sort of like Brian Hoyer with more experience.
Yeah.
He doesn't make a lot of mistakes, and but they're not. They're not going to scare you, and they'll continue to get better as Sammy Watkins gets more ingrained into things. But I've been impressed with Cleveland's defense, especially with all the injuries up front, and they've held up pretty well. And we said it early in the season when Joe Hayden was getting killed. The cream rises to the top. He's been very, very good over the past month or so. And I think it's been the secondary. Whitner's been a lot better than I expected. I thought, when you look at that trade on paper, T.J. Ward, in essence, for Dante Whitner, it didn't make a lot of sense to me because of the age, but he's played well. And Buster Skrine, give him credit, he's played well this year. That's only going to hopefully improve the depth when, if Justin Gilbert gets up to speed at some point.
And, looking at, again, this defense depth, too, we talked about, that's another thing, with the season coming down the home stretch, you can say these things now, and it doesn't come across so much as if you're, sitting there just making excuses for a team or whatever. But you have to admit, when the tale is told on this season, outside of this whole quarterback thing, one of the biggest things that surprises me about the Browns is their ability, and it just shows they're starting to build some organizational depth to overcome one injury after another. Kendall Lewis said about 2 weeks ago, he said, when does that point come, though, when it's just too much? No matter whether the team is called the Browns or whether they're called the greatest team in the world, at what point do you lose too many guys to where you just can't keep throwing the next man up? And I was really careful to avoid going on that because you don't want it to. In the middle of the season, it sounds like, hey, we're making excuses. We're set. No, okay. But looking back, and I think next year when you look back, you'll be like, damn, a testament to the guys that did play, that they were able to maintain, regardless with that injuries. Because look at that offensive line. Look at the defensive line. Good thing they had the depth that we talked about because they've stripped it all out with injuries, and we've seen that. But it lets you know that for the first time in years, a buddy and I were talking about this the other day, they are truly getting some of that depth at these positions that they didn't have before. But you've really got to be one more layer deep before they can really sustain injuries like they did this year.
Yeah, and, another one, veteran guy, but Jim Leonard coming in yesterday played pretty well. You need
it's
that.
A safety net.
And you need that depth. And even Gilbert, as little as he played, he's down with the illness, and Williams kind of steps up and plays okay. It's been impressive because they have lost so much. As you mentioned, offensive line, we talked about the hiccups when Alex Mack went down. And that's another thing when, I hate to keep going back to Hoyer, but at the same time when he started having a lot of problems is when Alex, you could trace it right back to that injury. And
the
same thing with the,
all of it. Yeah.
A lot of things with that offense.
Yep.
And those are just typical players. It's not making excuses. It's, difficult players to replace. When people are playing at a Pro Bowl level like Mack and like Gibson was, it's not easy. It's easy to say next man up. It's not easy to replace them.
Right, I say that all the time. I'm like, man, next man up is a great, cool coaching thing, and sometimes it's cool. Like when the next man up is right there with the first man up, that's awesome. When you're next man up, Mingo to Sheard or something like that, you're going, okay, next man up's all right, But
yeah, it's an indication, by the way, when and that's not to say you could have two very good players at a position, and there might not be that much of a drop off. But when you have an elite player at a position, it's always going to be a drop-off.
Yes, no matter how good the backup is. Yep, exactly. And you and I
that's exactly what went on with Mack. And Gibson hasn't been doing it as long, but as I said, he was playing at a Pro Bowl level this year. And it's difficult to replace that kind of production.
John, one last Browns question related here, and I want to talk a couple about these other NFL games before I let you go. But the other thing, too, and this is something that also goes into the questioning of the timing of the decision to change quarterbacks is, while I don't think it will be a complete overhaul this season until you get into the offseason, there's going to have to be some changes to the offense because of the different skill sets in what you've got. And I think you're going to run a different, and maybe it's easier. Maybe you simplify it down, you go with a lot more of the shotgun and the pistol formation stuff, and you dumb it down a bit. But there's going to be, and I also question changing too much of the offense with 4 weeks to go in the season as well, because you're going to have some of that with the two. We talked about the different skill sets between the two quarterbacks, and there's going to be a different style of play with each one. So on top of everything else, on top of him being a rookie in the playoff stretch with a month to go, you're also going to be asking other people perhaps to tweak some things and change some terminology or some play calls, or maybe you're running different formations that you haven't even ran most of this season. It just, again, ties into not a good recipe for victory, which, when you're portraying the guy as riding the white horse, is a bad setup for everybody. So that's just something else to keep into mind as well. What do you expect them to do with the offense? Obviously, a lot more pistol, a lot more bootlegs and rollouts. Any other changes you expect to see?
No, I mean, I think everyone looks at, to be honest, everyone looks at Aaron Rodgers, and to a lesser degree, everyone looks at Russell Wilson, and they get enamored with the ability to extend plays, and that's what I think Cleveland is hoping for.
For sure.
And he'll certainly be able to do it better than Hoyer. There's no question about that. To expect him to do it at a level of Russell Wilson is laughable. At the level of Aaron Rodgers would be, let's be honest, nobody's done it at that level in the history of the game. I always say, I've said it before, Green Bay is the only team in football that you hope runs the play they called. You want them to run the play they called, because if he gets outside of the pocket, you're dead.
Exactly.
You're done. And everyone gets enamored with that, and they want to find their own, and it's just not easy to find. And maybe Johnny Manziel turns into that 3 years from now, 2 years from now, hopefully sooner. But again, I keep going back to the timing. To me, it's about timing more than anything else. And to me, if I understand people hear what they want to hear, but to me, if they take anything out of this conversation, take this out. I think it's unfair to Johnny Manziel, far more unfair to him than to Brian Hoyer. That's just how I feel about the decision.
I agree with you. That's the thing that I wanted to stress, that I hope people took out of what I was saying. As much as I have my own personal thoughts on whether Manziel will succeed here, there, or anywhere, you surely didn't put him in the best position to succeed right off the bat. But that is to be what it is. Talking about some of these other games as we were going around, I'll talk about Green Bay and your boy Aaron Rodgers here in a minute, but around the North, the AFC North nearly went 0 for yesterday. Cincinnati able to pull that game out there, but how about San Diego? First off, I thought for sure, to be honest with you, when I was looking at the scores maybe 3/4 of the way through yesterday, they were rolling through the bottom, and I thought it was going to be the opposite. I'm like, okay, Baltimore is going to be the team that wins. Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, and Cleveland look like they're going to lose these games. And then the finals hit, and they flipped over the in-game, showing you what's happening. And I saw the finish to that San Diego-Baltimore game, and I just said, "Get out of here, man!" What a comeback there for the, I don't know, comeback or collapse, whatever you want to say, but what a finish there with the Chargers in Baltimore.
Yeah, you never really expect a West Coast team to come east, especially when in cold weather and win. So it was certainly a huge win, not only in the standings. San Diego's been that sort of Jekyll and Hyde team this year, starting out 5-1, and everyone thought they were Super Bowl contenders. Then they lose the 3 in a row, and now they're right back at it, 8-4. They're back ahead of the Chiefs. They're breathing down the Broncos' throat. And, if they can keep Phillip Rivers healthy for that stretch run, I think they're in a good position to be a wild card team at the very least.
Phillip Rivers,
just because,
couple bad performances the last few weeks. My son has him in fantasy football, and I just know I heard.
Yeah, he's been banged up.
I've heard some things about Phillip Rivers.
He's not right, and that's what I mean. They got to get him healthy.
They need to get
but
him back
it's not about stats with the great quarterbacks. So much can play into that, whether it's, the weather on a particular Sunday, or the fact that they could have a nagging, whatever, shoulder, elbow, whatever. Your stats can skew, but if Phillip Rivers is under center, you're going to get good quarterback play. And first, and San Diego's had that for a number of years, and if he's healthy, they're going to be difficult.
Yeah, I've always liked Phillip Rivers, and who expects to go on the road, as you said, go to Baltimore and drop 21 in the fourth quarter like that? Wow, San Diego does the thing there. And then how about New Orleans in Pittsburgh, storming out and getting that victory there, 35-32 early on? I said, man.
Yeah, you can't predict this league because you just mentioned you got warm weather San Diego going across country beating Baltimore. You got dome team New Orleans going into Western Pennsylvania, beating Pittsburgh. And we all know the Saints never went on the road, but all of a sudden they lose 3 in a row at the Superdome. They were probably glad to get out of there. It really is a parity-driven league, and maybe that's what you can hang your hat on. Maybe when you least expect it, somebody's going to come up and win, because I don't know many people thought the Saints could go into Pittsburgh and get that win.
Absolutely. I mean, think about that, man. Four guys catch touchdown passes, and they're not Jimmy Graham. I mean, really. And you know what? It's funny, too, because I was talking to some guys over the weekend, and that when we were looking at that game, it's like, sometimes the best thing you can do is go away from home when things are going bad for you like that. And everybody goes, oh, well, New Orleans wins them all at home and loses them all on the road. And then, you go to Pittsburgh and you do that. And you know what? Isn't Pittsburgh now? They're the only North team that's lost to an NFC South team, and they've done it twice now this season, haven't they, I believe?
Yeah, they're going to kick themselves when they don't make the playoffs.
I mean,
and obviously, obviously Pittsburgh is used to – they're not used to these long stretches without being in the playoffs. So I think if they miss again, and it's going to be very difficult for them, for once, you're going to be hearing about heat about, for the Steelers head coach and Mike Tomlin. I mean, that's just not an organization used to being mediocre, and they've been the definition of mediocre, 8-8, 2 straight years, and, as you mentioned, losing to NFC South teams, not only losing to them at home.
Steelers,
they lost to Tampa Bay and New Orleans at home. That's bad.
Like we were talking, LG called in earlier about the Browns, and how he gets frustrated that a different Browns team, it seems, can show up from one week to the next, and how they could get so up for Pittsburgh and Cincinnati and a couple of those good victories, and then show up and be so woeful against some of the bad teams. You could almost say that about Pittsburgh too, as far as they're Jekyll and Hyde, because when they're on some of these weeks, you go, man, Pittsburgh's as good as most of these other teams out here. But then you have other weeks where you go, man, is that the same Pittsburgh team that showed up and showed, threw 6 touchdowns or whatever it was? And it's the same thing. It's the league. It has to be, because when you can say the same thing about so many different teams, it just has to be a function of the league in general.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I always say people get myopic about their own teams, and they don't realize that the same thing is happening all over the league. Whether it's giving up large